Um, Is that better? Is it better being light or dark? Yeah. From a usability point of view, dark seems to work nicer, but from a presentation point of view, I think light works better. So, yeah. All right, let's leave it like that. So, just giving you sort of a basic overview of the platform, because we'll give you a URL a little bit later on where you can go, you can register, you can get your own New Relic free account, right? It lets you ingest up to 100 gig of telemetry data per month, right? Ongoing. You don't have to put a credit card or anything. It just, yeah, you've got your own free account. The lab that we'll give you also will ask you to create an account with an organization called Glitch, right? And that will allow you to spin up a sample application, right? Which you can then instrument, and you can get that sample instrumentation to be reporting into your own personal New Relic account. So it'll just give you a little bit of a play around. So it's like, oh, here's an app. You've instrumented the app at the APM layer. You've also done it at the browser layer, and you can then see the data in your New Relic account. So that you know what you're going to be looking at, when you first log in, you can see it brings you to this thing called all entities, right? So basically everything in the platform that you can interact with in any way is an entity. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, oh, that's my application, or that's my host or something. Yeah, those things are entities, but also things like if you have a synthetic monitor, that will also be an entity. Any secure credentials that you store with us will also be another entity. Dashboards are entities. So everything's an entity, right? If you can interact with it, that's what it is. So you can see here I've got my APM services. Might just jump in on one of these right now. So let's look at this guy. This is a web portal application. Let's just pull back a little bit more data here. All right, so you can see this is just on the summary page, right? We've got how fast my app is performing, right? So this is a Java app. I know that because it says Java down here. If it was PHP, it would say PHP there, right? But you can see that the timing. So for my web portal application, it seems to be taking about 15 to 20 milliseconds to respond, right? That's just the web portal app itself, right? But actually, if you were querying web portal, if you were performing transactions, that's not what you'll see. You'll see more like a 60 millisecond response time, right? So it's separated out immediately, the blue, which is the Java code of this application that we're looking at, versus the green, which is now the request came in, this app needs to go to another app to fulfill that request. So in other words, out of my 60 milliseconds, how much of this time was that particular app, or how much of it was passed on to something downstream in order to fulfill the request? So yeah, that's the difference between your blue section, this app's code, versus the green, something downstream. Now, if you want to see what's downstream, you come across here to the service map. And this guy here has got, you can see the three layers of the stack, right? So we've got our user experience layer, right? We've got, so as I mouse over things, it tells me a little bit about them. If I go here, it says web portal browser application. I don't know how well you can read that, but it says web portal browser application there. So that is the front end instrumentation, right? So this data is coming from actual browsers, like wherever they may be around the world. Like we've just taken the the info that was collected when web portal was accessed from those particular browsers. Now, what happens when you go to a URL? Well, you'll start, for example, in a browser, and you will call, an application to do something. So you can see that right there. You don't actually create these maps, right? All you do is you apply the instrumentation to your different entities, and then because the agents can see what's going on and they can see the transactions, they'll say, oh, okay, so we called that URL over here. Well, we know that URL is served by this application here, so we can see that there's a connection there, right? And similarly, you can see this web portal service, right, is actually running on these 8 hosts, right? So yeah, it's a distributed service. We've got 8 instances of this application that takes external requests, right? And it responds to things. You can actually, it's actually a real site. You can actually go there. It's web portal. Sometimes I find it's helpful to actually just show the actual thing that's instrumented, right? So yeah, that's the actual site itself, right? So when you hit this URL, right, like I just started there, right? I was at the browser and I made a request from the application, and it took a moment and it came back to me with a response, right? And you can come in here and you can interact with it. You can log in, buy a pretty awesome phone. That I want that one, that phone. But yeah, as I click around, I'm actually just performing different transactions on the application, right? So let's say I want to, so looking back at my app, I can go across here to transactions. And you can see these are the different transactions that my application performs, how long they're taking. You would see over here quite clearly if there was a problem with one of them, because this is showing you performance over time. So if any one of these all of a sudden had a very big spike, you'd say, okay, well, maybe it's not necessarily my whole app, but one transaction in my app is now giving me a lot of grief, and I can immediately narrow it down to that particular transaction. And then what you can do is you can say, let's say, for example, that my this one here, phones JSP, was performing poorly. Come in and you can click on that transaction in itself. It shows you some data over time, and you can even come down and look at individual invocations of when that transaction was performed. All right, so last one we got was from 4 minutes ago. Come in and look at it, and it'll give you a breakdown. All right, on this occasion, what happened? So the app performed, this phone's JSP transaction, and that was invoked through this, right? So you can see it came from browse phone's URL. And then down here, look, we've got all the different segments of the transaction and how long each segment actually took. So over here, if I've got something, this sort of goes back to the question we had before, how am I going to diagnose performance on something? Well, I've got a 2-second transaction here, right? It's a 2-second response time on the app. And 1.73 seconds of that, right? 86% of that time was actually spent external in this other service, Toolchain, right? This is this happened a single time, right? But if this was a bit of a pattern, well, I probably wouldn't be looking at it from the web portal point of view. I'd probably be going to that external downstream service and saying, if it's always slow from there, I'm going to get best results, obviously, if I improve performance from that point of view, rather than me trying to focus on this app here, which is, in this particular example, only consuming, well, about 10% of the overall transaction time that it takes. So this helps you know straight away, is it this app? Is it something downstream, right? And then specifically where downstream, and then you can drill in and you can see the individual breakdown of the downstream transaction if you have that instrumented as well. Now, whether I go, I'll come in another way now. I'll go from the top layer. So if I go to browser, so because this is a different entity, it's showing me a different summary page with different statistics, okay? When you're looking at things from a front-end perspective, I'm not looking necessarily at, I mean, I am still looking at errors, but they're different errors. But I'm not looking at things from an APM point of view now, right? I'm looking at things like, you know, how long did it take for the largest recognizable element to load on the page, right? I'm looking for things like how long does the site take to respond when interacted with, okay? And how often do things move around on the page, right? Making it a kind of a unpleasant experience, right? So we're looking at different things here because we're looking at the front end. And so you can see everything is geared around the user experience. You can see page view load times, front end times versus back end times. And obviously, if I was going to look at things from a completely different perspective, again, just going to another layer. I'll just pick this. Yeah, just to show you, looking at a different entity again, this time from a host point of view, right? I can see underlying resource statistics. So nothing to do with specific transactions that might be running on that particular host, right? But if I want to see those, I can very easily see them if I was just to go to the application itself, right? And look at the telemetry coming from there. A couple of other things. You've got the ability to create all of your own dashboards as well. Okay. So for each of the different types of entity that we have, there's already, for most of the important ones, there's already a page that's kind of purpose built for you to best understand it. But in the event that you want to look for something very specific, you can always come in and create your own dashboard, right? There are a whole lot of pre-built ones, right? So we've got something called quick starts, which is sort of easy ways to get into the platform and get things going. But there's a lot where you can just build off of a template, or you can create a whole new one from scratch, right? And you can, one of the easy ways to be able to do that is, for example, let's say, for example, that I want to take this chart here, right? Which is, it's showing me my transactions across 3 different percentiles, right? And maybe it's useful, but you know, it's showing me the 99th, the 95th, and the 50th, right? And perhaps I want the 75th, right? And it's not on there. You know, you can always you can always come in and actually view the query itself, right? And see, okay, well, how did you get that data? And that would then allow you to go in and edit it. So if I go view the query, well, normally when you say view query, it pops up. You can see it. It should be down there. I don't know why it's not there now. But you could also do this. So add to dashboard. And let's just create a new one. Oh, I'm thinking I'm going on an account. Oh, I know why. I'm on a restricted account at the moment. That's why it's telling me wrong account. See? Probably can't see that. But yeah, I'm on an account that I shouldn't be on, which lets me see a bunch of stuff, but doesn't let me do certain things, right? So yeah, that's why I'm having that problem at the moment. But yeah, normally you can come in, you can view the query itself, and be able to make easy minor modifications to it, add it to a dashboard, change it after the fact, right? Customize things however you like. And we also give you full access for you to be able to query all of the telemetry data that you send into New Relic. Okay, so, yes, question? I had a feeling that was going to be your question, right? So the question came in is, are they SQL queries? They are SQL-esque. Yeah. So the New Relic database is loosely based off of NoSQL, right? And but it is a proprietary database. Queries are actually becoming more and more SQL-like. But for the most part, yeah, we don't have tables and fields, right? We have event types and attributes, right? Now, how they differ? Well, an event type is like a table, but it's ephemeral, right? As in, if you're not sending any specific data in for that particular event type, then the table doesn't exist. Same deal with attributes. So the point here is that you don't need to configure any aspect of the database, right? You instrument your app, your infra, whatever you're instrumenting, point the data at New Relic, and it will take the data in most of the forms that you can give it, right? So you don't have to do any config on the other side. If you say in the telemetry itself, yeah, this attribute, this attribute, this attribute, bang, next thing you know, your table's got 3 attributes, right? Send data in for this event type. Well, if it's never been defined before, database just looks at it, goes, yep, not a problem. New event type, happy with that, right? So yeah, but it's essentially selecting your attributes and doing functions around them, and then selecting them from specific event types. You put in filters, you put in facets to be able to group the data out into different categories. So there is a if you're interested in that, and you should have a basic working knowledge of NRQL, and for you to get that, where is it? Go to, yeah, for you to get that, it'll be where I'd recommend is yeah. So when you guys log in with your own account, you get your own free account. Press the Add Data button. When you add data, just search for NRQL, New Relic Query Language, right? And when you come across to apps and visualizations, you'll see this thing here, NRQL lessons. Right, just come in here, and so mine's already installed, so just go open it. So you'll just tick a box, say yes, add this to my account, it'll be good to go. And you can see it gives you some basics of querying, showing you all the different kinds of queries that you can do. And it goes from very basic to actually quite advanced, and how to do some, very sort of interesting things with your underlying telemetry data. So yeah, would definitely recommend that you guys grab that app in your free account and just run through the lessons. It'll be really, really useful. Having said that, for you to get results from those queries, you need to have telemetry data going in, right? So you probably want to at least do the Hello New Relic lab that we'll send you, or your own project, your own app that you're getting, instrument that. Once you got data going in, expect to hopefully see something back from your queries, all right? Yeah. General rule, query gives you no response if there's no data there to query. All right. That's the basics, guys. I mean, I can kind of keep going and going and going. I don't think I should. I'm going to take a pause and just see how you guys are feeling and open up for questions. Yep.
And you can have a call on
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You should be able to integrate.
Yep.
I don't imagine we'll be good.
I was talking with Nick briefly about that, and just with regard to your specific term project, what you might be better to do would be have like one group email address that you guys all use, and then you'll log into that, and just so one group for the team. So each team will have its own email address, and then that becomes your personal kind of free account, right? And then you just put your project work into that specific New Relic account, right? So when you sign on, you'll get, if I go back to all entities, right, you'll see I've got an account number here, right? So I mean, this particular user account, so there's user accounts and then there's telemetry accounts as well. So this particular user that I'm logged in as has access to these two accounts. Right? So when you guys instrument your apps, one of the things you'll do will be down here. You see there's the agent will need to grab the ingest API key for the particular account. And that's how it knows that, okay, this telemetry coming from this app actually needs to go into this specific New Relic account, right? But mostly what you guys will do is you'll go to the add data location. This is, I mean, we put it up the top for a reason, right? It's probably where you're going to need to go for a while until you get data in there. So let's say, for example, you're writing a Python app, right? You want to instrument that. You can say, okay, I want to add data coming from a Python app. Okay, fine. And then see which account do you want that to go into, right? This won't work for me because I don't have access, but I should be able to get a couple of steps through. So I'll say, okay, I want it to go here, continue. And it says, okay, well, as a minimum, I need to name the app, right? And I need to have said what telemetry account it's going to go to, right? Yeah, so that error there, yeah, that's an access problem. But yeah, in your account, you shouldn't have that. One thing on naming apps, right? Let's say I write an app and I give it some really descriptive name like Dan's app, right? And there's somebody else using the same New Relic account, so different user, Dan's a pretty common name. So maybe they wrote a different app, nothing like mine, but they call their app Dan's App 2, right? Not Dan's App 2. They called it Dan's App as well as me. Now you've got two completely separate applications, not related to one another at all, sending telemetry in to the same telemetry account within New Relic, right? When that happens, it's partly by design, right? When that happens, it's going to aggregate the data together, right? So the reason why we do that is because you've often got instances of the same app, right? So I showed you that with Web Portal, right? Web Portal runs on 8 different hosts. So you've instrumented the application. I mean, think about it from a, from a containerized environment, right? Let's say you instrument your container, and then that container replicates across 8 different hosts, right? 8 different nodes, right? Well, it's not 8 different apps, really. It's the same app running 8 times. So provided it's got the same name, they all report in together, right? But just from your point of view, because you guys might be doing a little bit of account sharing and sending telemetry in, it's probably more relevant to you. You write one app and a second app. If you happen to name them the same thing, like, I don't know, assignment 1 or something, right? And they're not related, then yeah, it's gonna aggregate together if you're sharing the same New Relic account. We don't usually run into the problem because, the account's probably not shared, but yeah, something to be aware of. So give the app a name. You'll see here it says download your custom config file. It's grayed out. You can't do it until you give it a name. So let's name it something really good. Okay, and oh yeah, no, it won't let me go any further anyway because that problem. But yeah, name your app and then run that command, install New Relic. Then you drop the config file into the root directory of your application itself. Then you define, in this case, just as you start the app. So this is, you run your app there. That's what command you'd run, and you just define the config file as an environment variable at runtime. And I mean, step 4 is basically when you've completed the APM part, and we're just sort of suggesting, hey, you might also want to connect your infra layer. So the next command down there will install the logs integration for you after pulling down a New Relic installer shell script. All right. So if I go to a different program, for example, so I'll go Ruby, so different language entirely, continue, it's a Ruby program now. You can see the questions are different, right? Yeah, I'm using a bundler. Okay, well, follow these steps, right? So we try to make it simple, and there's always links to the docs that give you real sort of detailed explanations on how things work. Your thing works opposite to my thing, so it's going the wrong way. All right. So, other questions, guys?
I have one. When you instrument AWS has something like, are you a competitor?
So no, it's different too, right? I think where you get the perspective of New Relic is that you're seeing the data from all the different perspectives. So rather than like X-ray is just inside the app itself, and then you've got APM, which is again just inside the app, right? Your real benefit comes when you hook in all the other things as well. So you're seeing, okay, I'm looking at that app and I'm seeing it in X-ray, but what's it look like from the front end? And what's my underlying resources doing all together? So it's more the altogether aspect of the entire platform that you're looking at there, as opposed to just one specific component versus another, right? So that question sort of brings in a lot of different things, right? So you could look at other vendors maybe that just specialize in logging, for example. You say, well, okay, how does it compare from a logging perspective? Well, if you're looking at just that component, just the logging component, so well, yeah, they do those things, and New Relic does those things. It's more, how does it all tie in together, and can they tie everything in together? And yeah, there are a lot of vendors in the monitoring space, but there's not a lot yet in the observability space that can really give you a end-to-end picture very clearly.
Types of for each application. That would help. Navigate the manuals.
Yeah, I mean, even for I guess the more complicated things like Kubernetes, we try to make it as simple as we can. Let's say I want to go install New Relic in a Kubernetes environment. Okay, what account are you going to send it to? Give it a cluster name, right? What's the namespace for the integration? So everything that gets deployed to that cluster will be in the New Relic namespace. And then a couple of checkboxes there. And then, yeah, there's a guided install option, right, which pulls down that shell script that we saw just before, and then it invokes the Kubernetes installer within it. But for organizations using Helm 3, there's the Helm chart for it, right? It's all there. You can read it all before you deploy it. And for those using manifest files, something went wrong. Yeah. Yeah, there should be a manifest file there as well that does the same thing. So usually for each one of these different implementations, there's several different ways that you could deploy it. And on that topic as well, there's we have over 400 what we call on-host integrations, right? So that's up until now, we talked about your apps, right? This is you developing your own application, right? So you've got access to the code. You can go in there, you can edit it, you can tweak it, you can make it faster, slower, better, worse. You can do all those things, right? But sometimes you're going to be consuming somebody else's app and you don't have access inside the app, right? And you can't actually make, any measurable changes to that thing. So it doesn't necessarily mean you can't still monitor the thing, right? And that's what we call an on-host integration. So sometimes you go, okay, well, here's my infrastructure. I've installed this product, belongs to somebody else, but I'm going to install the New Relic agent on the same system, and then there'll be an on-host integration that, for example, HA proxy is one that just came to the top of my head, Nginx, these kind of things, Microsoft SQL Server, these sort of things, right? So I'm using these apps. I'll get, we have a purpose-built integration that's going to collect the data that is most common, that's most commonly going to want to collect from those particular apps, right? So those are on-host integrations. There's over 400 of them. Sometimes that's still not enough for people. We say, all right, you've got all these things, but what about if it's something really, really obscure, right? Like, can you instrument, like a petrol bowser? Yeah, we can. We did. We have done that, right? So, one of our customers wanted to do exactly that, right? And so we actually have an integration called Flex. And essentially what Flex is this, when you install the infrastructure agent, Flex is a binary that just comes with the whole installer package, and it can talk to basically if this mystery object, right, petrol Bowser or whatever it happens to be, if it has files that you can read, it has commands that you could run against it to get responses, or it has an API that you can communicate with and pull data out of. If it has anything like that, Flex can talk to it, can grab data from it, can transform the data into something maybe more palatable for ingestion, and then send it to New Relic. So yeah, I mean, you could have a ice cream shop app, which is your app, which you've instrumented, right? And then you could use Flex to go to the Bureau of Meteorology and pull the temperature stats for the day and correlate the temperature with your ice cream sales. You could, if you wanted.
Obviously, with software changing a lot, might have you keep the same kind of history and stuff might have changed. So you might have like a login page change to whatever account sign up and have the data still flow through the same.
You can, and you'll see it too. So your apps will still be there, right? But if you've changed the flow of data, then you'll actually see that change. You'll see it in a number of different ways. We've got a thing, funny enough, we call it a change tracker, right? And as you make a change to your app, one of the things that you'll do is you'll just send in just a small post into New Relic's deployment API just to say, hey, I've made a change to my app, right? And that will then come up on your telemetry as a marker, just showing you that something's different. And you can put description in there. You can say exactly what happened. So if you were going to change the data flow, for example, you would make reference to that particular change at the time you were doing it. And probably what you'll see is, let's say you got 4 or 5 different apps and your flow has changed. You'll say on 1 or 2 of them, your throughput will drop because it's no longer going that way. And on the other ones, it'll go up. So you will see the data, but it'll move, right? So you won't see it in the same app if you've made it go elsewhere. That makes sense. Yeah. I can, I've got some here that I can show you. Go back a bit. Okay, here's an example. Yeah, so here you can see these are coming up as related deployments. Actually, what they were changes done to a downstream app, and we sent a post into New Relic on the downstream apps agent saying, I'm making a change to this one. And because this is an upstream app, the platform recognizes that the upstream app may be affected by a change that occurred on the downstream app. And that's why it comes up as a related deployment, right? And not a deployment, right? So you saw I just dragged and dropped then, and I zoomed in on a small slice of the telemetry. So you can see now I'm between 4 and 6 in the morning. But it says here, it gives you a description of what's going on. Now, I could just go to, I know which one it is, it's this one. So if I go to the downstream app now, it keeps me on the exact same time window that I'd selected. And now you can see when I mouse over them, it's not showing a related deployment anymore. It's showing me a deployment, right? And this is an example actually. If I go back here for a second, let's say I'm looking after the web portal app, right? This is part of my job. I need to make sure the thing is running pretty smoothly, and I start to see response times going a bit slowly. I can look at this and I can know straight away, well, it's not really anything specific to do with web portal, because my Java code times haven't really changed. Something external to web portal seems to be performing a lot more slowly. Right? Now, let's say I don't know that it's the plan service, right? I'm thinking, well, I don't know, how many downstream services are there? There could be half a dozen, right? So what I could do is I could say, well, I want to zoom in on my Java code. I'd probably go to the transactions, right? Show me what this app is doing. But because it's the green bit that seems to be responding more slowly, I'll say, well, show me my external services. So these are the things external to web portal. When I go to this view, it's showing me, I mean, look at that right there. I can see on the response time, that plan service seems to be taking a lot longer than normal. So that would really be my first place where I would look, right? I'm saying, well, it looks like it's something to do with this guy. And because we have it instrumented, I mean, I can just come straight here. And go back to the summary. You'll see that same line, right? So yeah, response time on this particular app is really slow. Now, why is it slow? Well, okay, this is a PHP app, and you can see, right? The code was running pretty well, and then all of a sudden, this app itself is taking a very long time to do anything, right? And you can also see there's a MySQL component, which didn't used to take much time before, but now it seems to be taking a long time, right? So here's where I could say, all right, well, let's dive into this a little bit more. I know this app is going slowly. Why? Or what part of it is going slowly? Look at the transactions. And here's where I can see, look, this is what it does, right? And I mean, it looks to me like the purple bit, right, seems to be problematic, right? This part over here. So that's correlated to the get plans function that the app performs. So I'll go, okay, what we got here? We got that one. So that's my get plans. Click on that, and you can see here now I've got a full-time breakdown of all of the different segments that transaction has. And we can see, yep, okay, we've got a that big yellow bit there is MySQL plans table select. Wasn't slow, now is slow, but see, I know exactly where to look now. I know it's that bit that was performing very badly. And then I've got this other purple bit that pops up here, MySQL other, right? And that was because in this case, well, somebody tried to fix this and they replaced it with that, and that was just as bad. So that's actually what happened. But these markers actually tell you that. And this is part of the reason why anytime we make these code changes, you want to throw a marker in to your telemetry so you know, okay, well, here's how it was performing. What did I do? Because you'll forget. You'll definitely forget what you were doing. But you make a note of it, and it'll come back later on and help you out a lot. But notice down here, I've got a breakdown of exactly what was going on during this slice of time that we were looking at. Now, we're even highlighting something for you here. I've got 184 here, right? Now, what is that? That's average calls per transaction, right? So somebody's messed around with the code on this particular app, resulting in every time that transaction gets invoked once. So somebody says, get me the plans, right? That transaction runs on average 184 SQL queries. So one transaction, one transaction runs 1 or 2 or 3 queries. Yeah, not really a problem, but one transaction running 100 and something queries every single time, you can see where you're going to get a slowdown. So it highlights it for you. It tells you, yeah, right here, you've got a bit of a problem. That's not normal. That shouldn't happen. Right? And I can come in here, right? So this is the database component. Have a look at that. Click on that. It's the same as if I went to databases in the left panel. And see, there's 2 queries that this app runs. And I scroll down to the bottom. So I'm on my plans table select right now. If I scroll down to the bottom, I can actually see the actual query itself, right? So this is what I was talking about before, where, yeah, we do capture this data, but you'll notice that you can see I know the fields that we called in that transaction and the table where we're calling data from, right? But you can see that there's a bunch of things down the bottom, or maybe you can't see, I don't know, but there's, I think that's worse. But there's a few things here where it's all been obfuscated, right? Anything with a question mark on it is essentially us saying, oh, here's a query. That's what we asked for the database. But I'm not telling you the specifics of what we talked about. Yeah, and that's where we're not going to get that the PII leakage. Right? You can turn that off actually. We do have customers that have the raw SQL going directly in there, but then they take their own measures to prevent things. All right. More questions?
Tend to have people leave the rest of the
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we're a US company. Yeah. Yeah. Probably should know that, but I don't know. Yeah, I'm back row. Yeah, I do. I'm part of the Service New South Wales. Yeah, you would know. They're one of our big government customers. I'm part of their quarterly onboarding. Every quarter, I do a 2.5-hour session with them. It's a bit similar to this, and I go through all.
Any more project questions I can answer as well?
makes sense.
I'll have everyone.
Yeah. We are doing.
Okay. I'll keep this on. Sorry.
That's why.
Right. Thanks. See ya. What's up? Yes.
We make a new repo every time we make that.
Yep. Any microservice make a new repo. Give it your team name and then a meaningful name as well as to what like.
And that's all the information. That's all it'll be there. Like,
yep.
Processing that front end, whatever they'll be able to train project.
Nope, that'll be in the shared space as well. So everything is going in that organization.
Okay.
Thanks, Luke. Oh, I've got my face up.
It's interesting. Able to make it to your afternoon lecture. That's okay.
Oh, that's all right. Yeah.
The second year.
Hey, how's it going?
Really niche question about
Yeah.
and this is like about making backlog below that version, being important, and then just like how tasks are organized. And
Yeah.
anything to do with priority, like the high priority ones.
Yeah, ideally it's like the literal order of tasks in your backlog is the same as like you assign the priorities anyway. You could, I don't know whether you could like order it by priority, but
You can drag them around, but like it's just said that it should be in an appropriate order.
Yeah.
Really sure what that meant.
yeah, as long as it's just like logic. Priorities best.
A logical order.
Yeah.
Okay, because I've ordered them by sections as they appear in the criteria at the moment.
Yeah, that's fine.
And the other thing was story points. I can't allocate unless I change specific settings. I allocate them directly to issues. Am I doing everything right? Like, is that okay to go ahead and?
Yeah, go change the settings and
All
stuff
right,
so you
sweet.
can add
All
story
right, thank
points. All good.
All right.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Have a lovely day.
Oh, another question is the free access. Is that just students or any?